Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here. In today's video, it's going to be bringing you my review for The Sinking City. Now, this is a game that I beat about a week ago, and the reason I haven't done a review for it yet is because I've spent a few days thinking about how I wanted to actually tackle the review. You see, the single best and greatest thing about the game is something that if I relayed to you what it was and tried to tell you why I liked it so much, it would just be a gigantic, massive spoiler. And I looked at the other aspects of the game, the stuff that you would see in a typical review, discussing the gameplay, some of the art design, maybe some of the storylines, and if I really sat down and went item by item, gave you every little breakdown that I would normally do for a review, you'd probably get the idea that this game is just not really good, not really worth playing. But the thing is the one thing that the game does really well is done so well, I would say it's almost borderline masterclass in what it does. And that one thing that it does elevates it to the point where I overall have a feeling where I'm very positive about, well, not very positive about the game, but overall I have a positive feeling about the game. I don't feel like I wasted my time playing. And now, if you don't know anything at all about the game, I'll just give you a quick synopsis. Basically, you are playing as a detective. Your name is Charles Reed, and you've been having these visions. This is an H.P. Lovecraft-inspired tale. It's dealing with that sort of mythos that he created, and there's a lot of madness in the town, and you have been drawn to the town because you have been having visions that have sort of drawn you to come here and try to figure out what exactly is going on. You're trying to get rid of these visions. You don't know what's going on, and when you get to the town, you realize that there is just widespread madness and all sorts of different scenarios going on where there's some criminal underpinnings going on in the town, there's some cult worship going on, they're running part of the town, there's some certain families in the town that pull strings. It's a very corrupt town, and there's also all this madness that's been going on ever since a catastrophic flood that has pretty much submerged the entire city, hence the name The Sinking City. So that's the basic overview of what's going on. Now, you being a detective plays in directly into the gameplay loop. It is an investigative game. You are going to be spending pretty much 90% of your time running around the city, gathering clues from different people, and as always, it is a video game, so before people will give you information that you want, you're going to have to go do a quest for them, and that is going to be the basic gameplay loop. Now, some of the gameplay loop is pretty good, some of it is not so good. And one thing it definitely is extremely repetitive. You are going to be doing the exact same mission structure pretty much throughout every single main story quest and side quest that you do. There's a little bit more variety when it comes to the main storylines. I think they did a better job. And if you just played through the game only doing the main storylines, you probably have a much better time with the variety of things. These side missions are very, very samey. And that's just with the gameplay loop. The story surrounding the missions and the characters that you'll meet and the different side quests that you go on are actually pretty interesting. So the premise for why you're going out and doing these things actually has a good amount of variety. The problem is that the execution and what you actually have to do is going to be very much the same every time. You're going to go out to a certain location, you're going to get a clue. It's going to lead you to go, you're going to have to go to one of the municipal locations in the town, either the police station, the hospital, the town hall, the library, one of the locations in the town, to look up an address or find the locations of a certain person or a landmark in town where you got to go, and that will be the location of your next clue. And then you'll go to that location and you'll look around. There'll be clues in the room, whether it be letters or whatnot, and you also have a special ability because of the visions you've been having. You have this special ability where you can go back in time through a veiled wall, sort of like a smoke wall, and you can see incidents that happened in the past, and that will help you put the crime together. Once you go to a location, you'll search it, you'll find all the clues you can. Once you get enough evidence, that will unlock this special realm that your character can go into, and then you will have to sequence the events that you see from the past and sort of figure out that stage of the crime. The further you get in the game, the more different locations you're going to have to get to, and like I said earlier, some of the missions can take maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours to get through because you're going to have to go through so many different locations to find all the clues. Once you've gathered all the clues from different locations, you're going to go into what the game calls the Mind Palace, and that is where you are going to be able to match up the different parts of the evidence that you had, and that is where you are going to determine how you perceive the crime, how your character wants to put the evidence together. Either maybe this party might be guilty over here, this party might be guilty over there. Maybe you will be able to orchestrate how you want the narrative to go. Now, one of the drawbacks here is while the choices that the game will present to you are actually really interesting a lot of the time, it's one of the big strengths of the game. The problem is that overall, when you get to the end of the game, you're going to find out none of the choices you made throughout the story actually matter at all. When you get to the final ending of the story, you will literally have your choice of 3 endings. They'll be right there presented for you, and you can just pick whichever ending you want, no matter what choice you made throughout the game. That to me is a really bad design decision, and considering how good the game is when it comes to presenting different moral choices in each separate mission themselves, when it comes to the fact that they just didn't find a way to tie it all into the overall storyline, that was severely disappointing. But we're going to get back into that aspect of the game when we get to the spoiler part, because that really is the choices you make during the missions is really the absolute highlight of the game, and I'm going to highlight a particular one that really stuck with me at the end of the video. But let's just move on to some of the other aspects of the game, such as the game mechanics, the gunplay, stuff like that, because this is where the game really kind of sinks below the mediocrity level. The gunplay is just not really good. I would have to say at best it's average. Technically speaking, I would have to say it's probably below average. It's really not very good. The melee combat, they give you basically just one attack. I would say it's actually worse than Bethesda's melee combat, if that gives you any context. So if you can kind of picture melee combat that feels worse than Bethesda's, that might give you an example. It's pretty bad. The world itself, it's one open world city. It's not that huge of a city. However, there's such little variety throughout the city. I would have to say at least 60% of it, there in various districts, you'd be set down. If you didn't know already where you were, you could do a full 360 look around and have no clue what part of the city you were in, because it's going to look so much like the rest of the city. There's very few parts of the town that are going to be distinguishable in any way. There's like a financial district that has a little bit different look. There's an area where the rich people live that looks a little bit different. There's landmarks like a graveyard. There's a big church in the middle of the city. But other than that, a whole lot of the city looks exactly the same. A lot of reused assets. And this also plays into the missions, because there's only a very limited amount of different building types that the game provides. Yet every single mission that you go through is going to send you to one of those buildings. There is maybe a dozen to 15 different types of building types. Now they do a pretty good job of mixing those up. There'll be corridors that are shut off, maybe a stairwell that's blocked off, but the overall building design, you're going to be going into the same exact asset many different times throughout the game. And if you go through and do all the side missions, that's going to compound the issue even more. Like I said, if you just stick to the main story missions, the repetition is not going to be the same. They did a better job mixing up the different buildings you go into just if you stick to the main story. But if you are going through and doing all the side missions, you are going to see each building type probably a half dozen times each. And it's sort of like a Mafia 3 type of issue where you're like, okay, well, this is a different part of the city, but I've already been in this exact building layout multiple times at this point. Is that sort of issue. It just kind of speaks to the fact that some of the production value for the game overall just isn't quite where I would want it to be, and it's really kind of frustrating. Obviously, there's some budgetary issues. This game is not a AAA game. It is very much a AA game in many ways, although for a AA game, I'd have to say it does have a good presentation. It's sort of treading that line, that in-between line, but it doesn't quite manage to pull off what I would say is a really polished AAA type of game design. So that's one of the drawbacks of the game, is the overall layout, design of the city. I think they could have condensed it and told the exact same story in a smaller setting. At first I thought it didn't need to be open world, but by the end of the game I'm like, okay, I understand why this is an open world. It does make sense. It does need to be an open city. However, I think it could have been much smaller, and they could have done the game just as much justice by trimming the city down and making a more condensed experience. Now, since this is a game that is based solely on investigating crimes, talking to witnesses and whatnot, one of the most important aspects is how are the characters, how's the voice dialogue, all that. It's all pretty good, actually. The voice acting is, for the most part, pretty strong. The characters don't look totally weird in the cutscenes, although there are some freakish characters that have different, like, there's fish people in the game, stuff like that. So there are artistic choices in the game, but everything looks pretty good. The lip syncing is all done pretty well. Like I said, there's not a lot of corny dialogue. Everything seems legitimate. Overall, presented and done pretty well when it comes to that. And that is good because that is a very important part of the game. Aside from running around the city and investigating the buildings, what you're going to be doing for the rest of the game is just talking to people in conversation. So it is important that they nailed that aspect, and I do think that they did overall a good job in that aspect of the game. The main storyline itself, like I said, this is a Lovecraft story, so you're going to be dealing with supernatural stuff, monsters coming after you. You're going to be dealing with your own character madness increasing as you go throughout the game. This is all very much standard for that sort of story. It's all based around madness. The townspeople are all in the grip of this madness. You can see as you go throughout the game, townsfolk fighting each other. You're going to see them attacking each other in the street, all sorts of different things. Now, while the voices are done really well, the sound effects for the game are actually pretty brutal. The sound effects for the guns sounds like you're firing off air pistols. When you're in the boat going around, it sounds like you're in a riding lawnmower, or actually, it sounds like you're standing on top of a small lawnmower. It's like, it's really, the sound effects for the game are pretty bad. When you hit an enemy, it just kind of makes like a squishing sound. It's not really great. Now, the monster sounds that they make are pretty good. Like, everything that is organic sounds good. Everything that is mechanical sounds pretty bad. So a mixed bag there. But I think we're at the point now in the video. I don't want to get too bogged down with the rest of the stuff. I want to concentrate now on the absolute best part of the game. I hope you've gotten a pretty decent idea of what the game is about to this point. But I want to talk about what I truly found to be the absolute best aspect of the game, what really kind of elevated it from something that I find to be pretty below average to mediocre, and up to the point where, like I said, I feel overall pretty positive about my experience. Now, what I'm going to tell you is nothing to do with the actual main story arc of the game. It has nothing to do with that. This is just part of one of the main story missions that you're going to deal with. This is a sub-story within the main story that happens, and it's going to be sort of something that is completely separate from the overall story arc. So you don't need to be worried about me spoiling any of the main story, but we are about to jump into spoiler territory, and I'm going to discuss in detail a specific story in the game and one of the great moral choices that the game presents to you with just some great, excellent writing. Now, throughout the course of the game, about halfway through the main storyline, you are going to be accused of committing a murder. You are going to have to go through these standard investigation procedures. You're going to have to go and try to find some clues, figure out who actually committed the crime, talk to the person who has accused you of the crime, and put everything together and find out what really happened in order so you can clear your name. Now, throughout the course of the investigation, you're going to run into two main characters. There's going to be a politician who is a unsavory character, who is the person who has accused you wrongfully of the crime. The other person you're going to run into is the actual perpetrator, the person who did commit the murder that you have been accused of. Now, what you're going to discover throughout the course of the story is the person who actually committed the crime was coerced into doing so because his family had been kidnapped by a group of people that wanted you framed for this murder. So they gave this person a hat that looked like you, they gave him a weapon that is identical to the one you carry, and they sent him to frame you for the murder. He is not a willing participant. He is only doing that so he can protect his wife and son. So when you meet with him, you realize that this guy is not really a dangerous individual. However, he is a murderer. Something else you have to consider is, was he morally justified for committing this murder because he killed an innocent man who he didn't know in order simply to save his own family? Is it right to kill a stranger in order to save your own family? Now, that is just a ethical question. That is ethics 101, something you have to think about. That is a strong moral decision, but that is not where it ends. The person who has wrongfully accused you, the crooked politician, he says that he knows that it's you that committed the crime. However, he'd be willing to change his testimony if you do a favor for him. However, the favor he wants you to do is he actually wants you to poison his mother so he can collect the inheritance money to help fund his political campaign. Now, obviously, this is not a good guy. He is willing to, first, wrongfully accuse you of the crime that he knows you didn't commit, and secondly, he wants you to kill his mother just so he can get some inheritance money for his political campaign. Obviously, this is not a guy that can be trusted. However, he does tell you that he will change his testimony if you kill his mother. Now, you can refuse him, that's fine, or you can go to the mother's house. You will have a choice there of telling the mother what's going on, that her son is trying to kill her, or you can go through with the crime that he has planned and have her drink some poison. Now, for the choice in the story that I chose, I decided to poison the mother. And that way, this guy would change his testimony against me. However, I also now have a testimony from the person that actually committed the crime, and he told me that he would be willing to go to the police if I go and rescue his family. So then you go and you get the information you need to find out where his family is located, and then you'll have the option of either leaving his family in the arms of the kidnappers, in which case he will not be willing to turn himself into the police, or you can take out the kidnappers and rescue his family, in which case he will go turn himself in. So what I did in this case is I went and rescued his family, so now I have two different choices. I have the crooked politician, I took care of his mother for him, and now he is willing to change his testimony, while at the same time this other person is willing to come forward. However, I also have found throughout the course of the investigation a means to frame the politician for the murder, even though he technically had nothing at all to do with the crime. Now what do? Do you reunite the person with his family, the person who actually committed the crime? Because what you have here, now you've committed a murder, he's committed a murder, and the politician who you have the option of framing, who didn't actually kill anyone but is guilty of conspiracy. You see how convoluted this is? You see how many different layers of complexity there are to the morality here? Now what do? What I ended up doing is, of course, I framed the dirty politician. I mean, you can't trust this guy. The guy who actually committed the crime to start with seems genuine and seems like he's pretty much harmless. However, do you really want this politician in power where he's proven to you that he's totally corrupt? And at the same time, now you're going to get away scot-free, even though you're now guilty of a murder, just not the murder that you initially committed. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is just a masterclass when it comes to setting up complexity, when it comes to video game writing. There's other forms of medium where you're going to find some more complexity, but as far as video games go, I don't think I've ever come across choices like that are just quite that in-depth, stuff that's really going to stick in your head and make you think. That, to me, those sorts of moments, and there's other issues like this throughout the game that you're going to run into where you're going to have to make decisions. This is just the one that stuck out to me the most, and that alone is enough. That sort of thing that the game has is enough to pull it up and make it actually a game that I did kind of enjoy. Now, this is not a game that is going to be anywhere near my top games of the year list, but it is something I'm not going to look back on this game with negative feelings. I will say that. Now, a couple of the things that I do need to mention. One of the things that I also absolutely loved about the game is that there's different outfits that you can get in the game, different skins for your character that you can unlock by doing missions in the game. I know, crazy, right? They don't make you pay for every little time you want to change your skin. So that was something else that I enjoyed. Completing side missions, getting rewarded with skins is how games should work. That is something that I did like. However, we need to discuss something else that is pretty important, and that is the pricing structure for the game. Because at the end of the day, this is a game that's charging you $60. Now, the length of the game is probably going to take you about 15, 20, 25 hours to beat. But that's besides the point. What is obvious about this game is when you're playing it, this is not a highly polished $60 game. I think that the price point for this game probably should have been $40. And I know that that's kind of something like, oh, you're hurting the developer. Well, I'm just being honest with you. I don't think that this is a game that I would pay $60 for, or, well, I already did, but I don't think I would recommend anyone else to pick this game up at $60. If this interests you, if you like the Lovecraft type storylines, and any of the thing that I said in this video has you interested and you want to play the game, it's actually not that bad of a game. There's certain things that are pretty bad, but like I said, there's other things that do elevate it and make it a good game to play in certain ways. However, I would definitely wait for a sale. That is just my final opinion about that. Anyway, that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. I hope you liked the review for the game. I'm sorry if you didn't want any spoilers. I don't usually do spoilers in my reviews, but I just felt like it was really necessary in this case to get across what I thought is the best part of the game. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward, and as always, keep it turned to 11. I've got to get this AC on. It's so hot.